the seaside is like the most British place. Like London is seen as like the capital, and like you see bags and like, you know, like these like cheap sort of like shops selling like London, like everything, even in like Brighton. Like most outsiders perceive that as what like England is and like that kind of thing, whereas I sort of feel like the seaside is England, like summed up in like a place.
With your hand on my heart, paint the ceiling. With your hand on my throat, clear the
I think like the difference is growing up in like Morecambe, you're so like cut off from like London. Like you're in this completely different, there's not really like a scene as such, or like even as far as like Lancaster, there's like art galleries, but they're all like fine art galleries that sell like watercolours, or the thing I found when I did eventually move to Brighton was like how similar everyone was, because everyone sort of had the same influences and like listened, and watched the same things, whereas back home, like, there's few people into these kind of things. So that's like the massive difference between like Morecambe and Brighton for me, is like how isolated Morecambe is. Like obviously it's quite run down, but then there's places like south, like somewhere like Margate, even though that's being like regenerated and stuff now, that's still quite run down, and like, I think it has a lot to do with like the tourism industry there. Like it doesn't really exist in Morecambe anymore. Like year after year, everything's sort of like disappeared. So there's not really much to come for other than like, the Eric Morecambe statue. So people are reluctant to like come. At the same time, I like love that though. Like going home and being like a nobody again is great. Should I show you some bits and bobs? That was super cool. Ooh. That's cool, isn't it? That was good. It's on a Disney record. So I guess the first obvious thing is sort of like the characters that like came from growing up in that sort of poor environment, I guess. Like you see a lot of like sketchy characters, and like, I don't know, people like that definitely sort of filtered into my way of drawing. Like the people don't look like, I don't know, they're not nice looking people. I think skateboarding is like the first art form for me, really, because it was before I drew and like did any of that stuff, and within that you get introduced to so much stuff like music and people who made videos. Like people I was hanging around with were always like much older than me. I still have that like that mentality that like comes from skateboarding, like the way you look at things. Like people, like skateboarders, would see an object in the street and look at it like a completely different way. Like they see like a crooked like bit of something and be like, oh, I could like skate that or do a trick on that. I think that kind of stays with you. It's like as you get older, just the way you like look at things is always a little bit like skewed, a little bit different. Yeah, photography again is like part of skateboarding. Like we used to go out with cameras every day and just like film stuff and like anything, and then go home and make like these edits and like put music to it and stuff like that. But we were just doing it for like our friends, and like this like before YouTube and all that, you just like take it around and like watch it at someone's house. So that was like a really creative thing that we were doing that probably most kids weren't doing. I guess like jazz has been like a big part of my family. My granddad was in a big band, and yeah, he obviously passed on music to my uncle. And obviously my dad, he was a drummer, he was in like a lot of bands. He was a record engineer, and he bought records and went to gigs. Music was probably his life, it was like a massive part of his life. I remember finding like his record collection one day. It was just piled up in this cupboard, and being like, what are these things? I'd never seen these before, so I got them all out, shelved them up, and I started going through them, listening to them. I catch little bits of like a song, and then I'll write that tiny bit down, and then that'll be, that'll be a piece, or like, could be a title for a painting, or like the title of something. So that comes from music. I guess I've always worked to music, like headphones. I always have headphones on if I'm working, or like a record or something like that. Like that keeps me sort of like sane. This is the stuff I want to get back into doing, sort of like painting people. So this is a photograph I found on Facebook of a friend of mine. That's the original photo. I just loved the picture. Like, I don't know. Sort of summed him up in like one picture, like the pit bulls, American pit bulls. Like, you can't just blow up straight away. Like, there's a lot of stuff, you know, to sort of work with, and I mean, got so many ideas and stuff, but like, you can't do it overnight. And especially like after uni, you want to live in Brighton. It's expensive. You got to get a job. I did that, you know, last year, sort of working full time in a bakery, and like, it was a bit, you know, it was hard work, and like, it was taking all my energy away, and art was like the last thing I wanted to do. You know, with Instagram and all that sort of stuff, like, I'm posting what I do, and people were encouraging, and you know, they're like, oh, it's good to see you making things again, and like, the dream is to get a studio, obviously. Like, I can't, like, I work in here, but at the same time, it's a bit constricted. Maybe think about doing a solo show here in Brighton, because I've not exhibited here yet, other than like the university shows. So that would be interesting to see if I get a good response for that, or, you know, if I find the right gallery, because there's not loads of galleries in Brighton, considering like how creative the place is. So maybe think about doing a show like next year. I've also got a show I'm doing with a friend, Louis Appleby. So eventually I'd like to do this full time and do some, yeah, a lot of bigger paintings, sort of bigger work. But at the same time, yeah, I'm not in a rush either. Sort of just let it sort of happen as it goes. Like, the right things happen, you know, when they're meant to, so I'm a believer in that kind of thing.
With your hand on my heart, paint the ceiling. With your hand on my throat, clear the floor. Stolen seconds on a rough show. Loaded hands fire forevermore.
That's nice. I was obsessed with Wimpy for a little bit. I stole a cup from Wimpy. Yeah.